Hypixel Skyblock has changed a lot over the years, from a relatively simple MMO with a focus on collecting, to a full-scale adventure with quests, lore, and a nearly endless suite of activities. The game from just 4 years ago is essentially unrecognizable. Today I want to recognize how far Skyblock has come by going over its humble beginnings. Today we'll be examining Hypixel Skyblock's first updates. As many of you already know, Skyblock released on June 11th, 2019, and I'm not going to talk about this too long because this technically isn't an update. Its initial release for ranked players happened on this date, with an emphasis in the original design document on minions and collections, as well as cooperative play. There was also mention in this article of PvP tournaments in the Coliseum, purchasable furniture, rentable housing, and guild content, some of which ended up happening, while many of it did not. Skyblock's first actual update released on June the 13th, a mere 2 days after the initial release. This update focused on bringing the game to all players, regardless of rank, and also added the common rarity. Some other pretty interesting things happened on this day, notably that minions were generally made easier to get more of, with a maximum island cap of 20 at the time. Some major exploits were fixed, which is bound to be expected with a brand new game, and you no longer lost your inventory when dying to lava or fall damage. I can imagine the chaos that would ensue if that type of bug happened today. Skyblock's second update took place on June the 17th, which had some minor changes included, notably allowing fishing rods to deal damage similar to normal Minecraft. Also, the spawn rate of sugarcane on the Mushroom Desert biome was increased. There were also some bug fixes, most notably fixing too tall sugarcane or taller, dropping only one item, slimes being able to attack after death, and the A Lamau debug message. Apparently, if you did something in Skyblock, you would get this weird admin message that was not taken out from pre-testing. I think that's pretty funny. They should have left it in. On top of this, the enchantment table was renamed from Enchantment Table, and all 1.8 recipes were added to the game, such as fences, slime blocks, and more. What this essentially means is that for the first few days of Skyblock existing, you were unable to get things like slime blocks or fences, which is kind of hilarious. June 20th actually had multiple updates within the same day, one of which mostly being a bug fix update. Basically, this fixed the lure enchant to actually work, and also allowed it to affect the maximum amount of time it took to catch an item. On top of that, Smelting Touch was made to work on sand, logs, cacti, cobblestone, netherrack, and clay balls. And the sell price of Silk Touch and Growth were cut in half. If this happened today, people would be mad because it would be stopping inflation. On top of this, there was also a metric ton of other bug fixes, none of which were very important except for fixed door and wood price balancing, which was obviously incredibly needed. The arguably slightly more important update that came out that day was the armor and weapon balancing changes, which actually did some pretty interesting things. Growth 5 was changed from 100 health to 75, while Hardened Diamond, Speedster Armor, Blaze and Zombie Armor, and multiple other farming sets were all buffed. The Leaping Sword got a massive buff and a rarity upgrade, making it one of the best items in the game. And the Aspect of the End was buffed from 80 damage and 50 strength to 100 of both stat. Back then, that was one of the best swords you can get your hands on, and that buff was really appreciated. I remember people back in that time actually making videos about how the Aspect of the End was power creeping the game. It was that good at the time. The Golem Sword and Zombie Sword were also made significantly more effective, along with the Savannah Bow and the Ender Bow. We'll get back to the Ender Bow though, it ends up doing something pretty funny. On June 26th, we ended up getting another pretty significant update, adding things like Magical Mushroom Soup, the Jungle Axe, the Day and Night Saver, and other items to the game. On top of that, they also had a bunch of balancing changes, tweaks, and bug fixes. Another pretty interesting thing is that backpacks actually kept their items upon upgrading. That's right, before this moment, if you crafted a backpack, put something in it, and then upgraded it, that item was gone. On top of that, you are no longer able to pick up fairy souls with hoppers. How did that get in the game? I'll have no idea. There was also another bug fix that day that made it so if you had a fairy soul in your inventory, it wouldn't crash your game or kick you anymore, which I think is completely hilarious. They also ended up making a change here, allowing deliveries to be sent to your guide. Note that I did not say Jerry. This will come back in a minute. On June 29th, we also got a bunch of changes. They made it so that you can't just fly infinitely away from your island anymore while using Magical Mushroom Soup. I don't know how that one didn't come up in testing, but hey, they fixed it. They also made it so protection was now 3 defense instead of 2, a huge help to the 5 players who actually had more than 2 protection at this point. They also reduced the value of cactus from 3 coins to 1 coin. This one's the most interesting thing here. At the beginning of Skyblock, there was a huge obsession with massive cactus farms. Like, I'm talking full island scale cactus farms that could print out millions of coins per day. This was absolutely ridiculous at the time for obvious reasons, and this was before the days of like sell limits, so you could just sell an infinite amount of cacti. They obviously made this change to nerf those farms, but it killed cactus farming for a little while. They also fixed some pretty interesting bugs, including ones where clicking a menu button with an item on your cursor would delete the item entirely. That one's pretty hilarious, and I don't know how they didn't notice it. This is where I'm also going to bring up the ender bow again. You were able to duplicate pearls with it, and that was fixed at this time. And also there was another bug where you were able to kill people on the outside of the Colosseum. The whole hub was PvP for a short period of time. I don't actually know if it was the whole hub, but there were certainly exploits at various points in time where you were able to just kill people. This was obviously before the days of the booster cookie, so if this happened to you, there was a small chance you would just lose everything at that point. Moving on to July 2nd, we have a very major update, Skyblock patch 0.5, which was the fishing update. This added sea creatures to the game, multiplied fishing XP by 4 times over, added lily pad, sponge, and ink sac collections, fishing minions, bait, and more treasure loot. On top of that, skills for level 26 to 50 were added here. Previously, if you were at level 25, you had already maxed out the skill. They also added the ability to use some redstone on islands, and dark auctions were also included with this update. This is where things like the Midas Sword really took off. That type of weapon was super powerful at the time, and it later got a buff, which we'll talk about. I think that this was probably one of the best updates Skyblock got at the time. It was already popping off less than a month after its release, and this sent its player count into the stratosphere. There were also the promise that the game would never become pay to win, which you can argue about in the comments whether that promise was kept. Jerry was also added at this time, a very iconic character, replacing the guide who was completely removed, and honestly, I think this was probably the best initial update before the end update. This one really brought a lot of people to Skyblock who previously were hesitant, and things like Jerry just became an iconic part of Skyblock culture. On July 8th, we got a relatively minor update, which was mostly for bug fixes. Jerry no longer multiplied randomly, and aiming arrows no longer targeted him. Lifesteal no longer worked on players in the hub, which I can imagine was an interesting bug to find out existed. And also, angler armor no longer spawned a sea creature 100% of the time. I think some fishing people would like to have that one back, although I'm not very caught up on that one. On July 9th, we got the guesting update, which was Skyblock patch 0.6. Before this moment, you were not able to /visit somebody. On top of that, at this point, the magma boss was the big boss in the game, and people had to wait hours to get their chance at actually getting the Ember Rod. At this point, people were getting kind of sick of it, so the admins stepped in and made it so that boss loot dropped for every single person instead of people having to fight over one singular drop. Only the best players were able to get the best gear, but most people were pretty happy about not having to fight for stuff anymore. On top of this, there was tons of new items added, as well as indicators for the magma boss, which was actually just a lava stream that would go down the island, and when it hit near the bottom, the boss would spawn. Teleport pads and hot potato books were added to upgrade gear, and the larger talisman bag was added as well. There were 11 new fishing achievements, as well as personal leaderboards and buying items in bulk. Before this moment, you would have to spam click to get a decent amount of literally anything in this game. Telekinesis enchantment was added to the game as well. This essentially allowed you to pick up items and not suffer while doing it, which I think was pretty good. And the level 1 enchantment books were replaced with level 2 or 4 enchantment books in various cases. Frostwalker no longer worked next to bobbers, which was great for people who liked fishing, and also accidental drop protection was added. On top of this, various items got buffed. The Midas Sword got buffed as well to 120 strength and damage at 50 million coins, and Sugarcane was also nerfed here from 3 coins each to 2 coins each. Backpacks containing items could no longer be sold on the auction house. This one was a weird one. People would sell backpacks containing items that they maybe wanted to sell for a higher price, and people would get scammed, and so the admins had to step in here. On July 11th, we got a pretty small update. Telekinesis worked on bows now, and also didn't work anymore on bosses because apparently that was a thing. They also made it so that Silk Touch actually functioned properly. Prior to this, there was some sort of issue with item stacking that it just didn't comply with. On the 12th, we got another bug fix update, this one related to placing minions outside of the world border. On top of this, there was an exploit with spider boots, and also you could get kicked if you placed an item in the inventory crafting grid and then you deleted the item. This is pretty weird, I don't know why this would kick a person, but hey, it was a thing. On July 15th, they fixed an exploit with brewing stands and also made it so you were no longer able to place Jerry eggs in water on public islands. I really wish I could see this happen in action. I think it would be so funny. Admins, add this one back just for a weekend. On the 19th, they fixed a bunch of other things. Notably, the duplication bug related to middle clicking to swap items was patched out, and by extension, they disabled being able to middle click to swap items. They also fixed being able to break blocks on public islands. I don't know how they did this in the first place. This happened in some rare situations related to like water or something, but the fact that this was possible is also hilarious. On the 21st, they also fixed an issue with invitations to co-ops and fixed an exploit with the anvil menu, and also they messed with null items a whole bunch, making it so they were no longer as annoying. For the final update we're going to go over, we're going to talk about the end update. This happened on August 2nd of 2019. I think this is a pretty good place to stop because I think this is where Skyblock like really took off. Most people remember this time if you were a super OG, and people understand the things that were added here. Notably zealots, dragons, new minions and collections, as well as haste blocks and catalysts, as well as crazy OP lucky blocks you could find in the bottom of the end island. They introduced carpentry here. This was a cosmetic skill based on your Hypixel rank at the time, and if you were a non, you could only get up to level 3. Marco the Painter was added, including sprays to the game, as well as the big painting wall that you may know. They also added rune crafting here. 23 runes were added to the game. They added summer cosmetics, new collection items, perfect armor, magical water bucket, emerald blade, portals to all 5 of the miniature foraging islands were added here. This is a pretty big update, obviously. A lot of pretty iconic things were added. Perfect armor, pretty much everyone knows. The emerald blade became a crazy item for a while. And they also added a bunch of QOL changes, like Rusty, who would add telekinesis to any item for 100 coins. They added music in-game, which is pretty crazy. And they also made it so that you could set your own spawn on islands, remove your own hub portal, and they added warnings to the auction house for overbidding. You could also now specify how many minutes you wanted an auction to last, which people really liked. They also added the daily shop limit here. This one's a pretty big one. A lot of people still don't like this one to this day. And they also added new items to the builder's shop, such as stone bricks, glass, and wool. Finally, there was some bug fixes with this update. Notably, they fixed lava and water being able to be placed on hubs rarely, which I think is pretty interesting. I don't know how that one ended up happening. There were so many minor issues with the main way that islands work. You had the ability to break blocks, you could place water, you could spawn Jerry. I don't know how this kept happening, but it did for a little bit while in the early part of the game's history. They also fixed bow swapping, which was super popular. You would basically be able to shoot an arrow and then swap to a stronger item, and it was essentially a stronger version of sword swapping at the time, which only became stronger over time because of power creep. And then they also fixed an issue that prevented you from being able to collect arrows on the ground. This update is probably one of the most goated updates in Skyblock history. Most people who were around back then really loved this update. It kept people entertained for months. It was the point of the game when the most YouTubers were active. People like Techno were printing out in crazy, insane videos that were incredibly funny, and it was really a good time to be a Skyblock player. This was before things like booster cookies and gems and stuff like that, and people just had a great opinion about this game. Past this point, things started to get a little muddled, and updates slowed down pretty considerably as the admins decided to work on things like dungeons. But this was an incredible update, and I think it was the peak of the Skyblock community's morale. Gonna just speak off the cuff here for a little bit. There's no script or anything for this, but I wanted to talk about how nostalgic I felt while making this video. I don't think there'll ever be a game like Hypixel Skyblock for me again. This was truly a special experience, especially those early days. The admins put so much care into every single update, and I had so much excitement about logging in literally every day, and I don't think it was just about the game. Minecraft itself had been experiencing a bit of a resurgence. Hypixel Skyblock was just one part of that larger puzzle in 2019 and 2020. You look at things like SMP Live, which was going strong at that time. You look at things like A Tribute to Minecraft, which came out a year before and sparked a lot of interest in the game. And you look at the updates that Minecraft was releasing at the time, and everything was just pointing in the right direction. It was a special time in Minecraft's history, and I honestly am excited to say that I was part of it. And I really enjoyed just logging in every day and seeing what was new. Playing Skyblock at that point was like playing a game with an infinite amount of charm. Literally everything about it to me was essentially perfect, and I don't think that experience will ever happen again. I appreciate you guys for watching this video till the end, and I hope you felt that same sort of nostalgia I felt while making this video. I really do appreciate it. If you enjoyed, make sure to subscribe and use code RAIL for 5% off on the store. I really would appreciate that. At the end of the day, look to the future, fellas, and I will see you then.